Can anybody tell me what this is? Yes, back there. Yes.
Is it a motor?
That exactly it is. That it is here. This comes off one of my power tools. Okay? So it uses to power my saws and all kinds of other stuff. Okay? Now I'll ask another question. What do you think this is? I'll go here. That's correct. Guess what? This one comes out of my furnace. Okay, I replaced the motor in my furnace, so this one came out of it. In other words, these motors are everywhere. Wherever you look, you will find motors running. All kinds of appliances and all kinds of things, we depend on these motors. What do you think this is? Yes. Correct. Now, who invented this motor? Anybody else? Back there? That's correct. He invented this motor in 1884. All right? This is an alternating current motor. The electricity we use today is all alternating current. Our direct current, the difference, can anybody tell me the difference between alternating current and direct current? All right. Think of a battery. That is your direct current supply. Electrons run in one direction. They just keep looping from positive to negative. They just keep looping around. Alternating current, they oscillate and they go back and forth. And that is a huge difference because that makes it possible to transmit electricity over humongous distances. In Tesla's time, the only power that was being transmitted was produced by Thomas Edison, and it was DC electricity. It only went very short distances, a couple of miles. And Tesla said, that's right, a couple of miles, like 5 kilometers. So you'd have to build one of these smokestacks burning coal to produce electricity every few kilometers. Not very efficient, and we could not function the way we do. So this motor is the most important element of all inventions that we use today, and we'll discuss more afterwards. But listen to this.
In 1891, a Serbian scientist demonstrated his latest inventions before an awestruck audience at Columbia University. Tubes held in the hand of Mr. Tesla, a reporter wrote, appeared like a luminous sword in the hand of an archangel representing justice. Nikola Tesla was already famous, the scientist whose experiments with electricity were destined to transform daily life in the 20th century.
We live in an electrical world. We take it all for granted. We have light bulbs, we run our refrigerators, our air conditioners, our electrical motors. All of that is all directly led back to Tesla.
100 years ago, he pointed the way toward robots, radio, radar, remote control, the wireless transmission of messages and pictures. He dreamed of harnessing the wind and the sun to make free energy available for everyone.
When you think about electricity, you think of Edison. But Tesla was just much more of an original American than Edison.
Tesla had a lot of obsessions and odd phobias, and yet he was enormously popular and celebrated. They did not stop him.
At the turn of the 20th century, Tesla was acclaimed. Millions of Americans knew his name. But only decades later, he was forgotten by all but a few.
He doesn't have a disciplined imagination. He has a fertile imagination. And so he's kind of crazy. Oh, he's a genius. No doubt about it. But he's an idiosyncratic genius.
His luxuriant imagination was the source of his genius and the cause of his downfall.
Now, I want you to think a little bit big. Think on a massive concept. Okay? And listen to this professor.
If you could simply turn off all of Tesla's contribution, modern civilization would come to a grinding halt. We would be thrown back literally 100 years into the past, back into the days of steam engines and steam locomotives. That's a contribution that Tesla made. In some sense, he's the architect In some sense, Tesla is the architect of modern day civilization.
Hear a little bit more from him.
Tesla is that he was, I think, cheated of much of his well-deserved fame and also patents. He was in on the discovery of radio. He was experimenting with X-rays before the announcement of the discovery of X-rays. He pioneered the AC motor. You realize that everything you see around us, the lights in this room, the lights of New York City, are all energized by AC motors and AC power. So in other words, Tesla laid the foundation of a second industrial revolution.
I want to point out, take a look overhead and you'll see some lights. Those are fluorescent lights. The inventor. Now, I want to take you more, bring you more into why is this so important and so relevant, especially to this area. Okay? The majority of the linkage is in the city of Hamilton, but it expanded all the way into Dundas, into Oakville, into St. Catharines. It all happened in this whole geographic area. All right? There's a group of men that are referred to as the Five Johns. John Patterson, he was the real visionary. We'll explain a little bit more. John Gibson, he went on to become the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. And there were three others, Dixon, Sutherland, and Moody. Okay? They had a common interest. They were businessmen, and they needed power. So in the late 1890s, the big thing was how to get power for your businesses because you didn't have power. Everything was steam generated. That's the nature of the power, or in the few elite pockets where Edison was producing power in major centers, because it wouldn't have been produced in this area at all, because this is too scattered. It had to be in major populated centers because you couldn't transmit it over great distances. So they collectively came together and they needed something. They founded a company called the Cataract Power. This is John Patterson. He was really the visionary. And all the research that I've been able to pin down, this is the man that we need to respect for what he did for Hamilton. As I mentioned to you earlier, they said you can't transmit power. All the wisdom at that time, you can't do it. Well, here came the cataract people, and they started talking. And who did they talk to? The Hamilton boys talked to Nikola Tesla. And he gave him the approval that the idea that they had in mind was going to work for them. All right, we'll talk a little bit more about it. So how did all this come about? Well, Tesla came together with a whole system of generators, transformers, and motors. So he had to produce the power, then he had to transport it to very high voltage to transmit it over great distances. Then at the other end, they would step it down using transformers again to save power that we have in our homes, 120 volts. And then our motors could run on that power. Some very important people that came together on this was George Westinghouse. Westinghouse was looking how to defeat Edison. So he realized what Tesla had, and he buys Tesla's patents, and the two of them come together. All right? And this building here is one of the first plants that was built in Hamilton by a foreign company. Westinghouse built his own manufacturing plant in Hamilton in 1897 because he knew what was going to happen next. Ontario Power Generating, they're the people that produce power for us. On the 110th anniversary of a place called the Cube, they recognized that it was Tesla's new inventions as part of the whole new age. All right? This is the power plant that these guys built. It's called the Q Falls. It's 35 miles away from Hamilton. But to ship power 35 miles when Edison was doing 2 miles, that's crazy. But Tesla told them they can do it. This is the first building that received power in Hamilton, and part of the name is still on this building. And Hamilton received power August 25th, 1898. Now, can anybody tell me, how many years ago was that? Who's good at math? You're right. Awesome. Very good. Good paying attention. So Cataract Power brought the power here, and as I said earlier, it went all the way into different areas. Around Brock University, so a lot of you may know where Brock University is in St. Catharines. Next to Brock University, there are some lakes. And notice the names? Lake Gibson and Lake Moody, two of the 5 Johns, and the 2 power generating station is below. Those lakes are man-made lakes to feed the power plant. Okay? So Electrical News basically at that time said that this was an incredible accomplishment. What they had done was unthinkable before then. Only 2, when they started actually consulting with Tesla, no major power transmission has been built anywhere. That was in 1896 when Tesla gave him the go-ahead, August of 1896. In November of 1896, they sent power from Niagara Falls, New York, to Buffalo, a distance of 17 miles. These guys did 35 miles. So you can see that these guys were incredible accomplishments. Hamilton, of all things, got to be known as the Electric City, not the Steel City. And now the other crazy thing about all of this is I went to school in Hamilton, never learned nothing about it. So the impact of the city was humongous. A lot of people came in, a lot of businesses established. A lot of these businesses are no longer there. They were major manufacturing plants. Among the companies, and we call it now ArcelorMittal, DeFasco was one of those companies. Okay, and Westinghouse was huge. So Hamilton had everything, had all the critical things, and we had power before our huge neighbor, Toronto. We had power for 8 years before they got power from Niagara Falls. Now, with power comes prosperity. Industries move in. What do you think this is a picture of?
Car.
Okay, now, more specific. What is so special about this car? It's a horseless carriage. Horseless carriage, but very unique about this car. Right back there. It's powered by electricity. No, it's not.
It had a 2-stroke engine on it.
You're correct. But in the range of cars, what do you think this car was in Canada?
The very first.
Correct. The very first car in all of Canada is brought into Hamilton by one of the 5 John Moody. Now, the picture in here, you are all a little young, but you're all probably dreaming a little bit. And what are you dreaming of? To have a
Car.
car drive. You want to be able to drive, right? That is the first teenage driver in all of Canada. All right? So, not too much older than you. That's John Moody Jr. Okay? So, some incredible facts. They had all kinds of railways. In Hamilton, they're talking about LRT, light rail transit. They had these little, they had one vehicle cabooses almost, or trains that ran on electricity. That's what Cataract, with the company, one of the proponents needed. They needed power to drive those trains. And those trains fit almost like the current GO system, except they were centered out of Hamilton. Hamilton was the center, not Toronto. So that's part of their needs. Okay? They built electrical trains. They were built here they were built in Hamilton. Okay? The industry, as I told you, massive growth. We're not going to go through everything, but one of the important things what it did is it brought a lot of workers in. They needed a lot of workers. Companies came in, and a lot of immigrants came in, and a lot of them started forming their communities. Right in Hamilton. My church is one of these churches. It was founded in 1913. One of the oldest, one of the oldest Serbian churches in Canada, and it's the oldest church on the eastern side of Canada. Okay? So, impact, as we've already indicated, was huge. They managed to deliver it. So, who is this man, Tesla? Okay? Well, he was born in 1856. In 1884, he moved to the United States. He's an inventor, he's an electrician, he's a mechanical engineer, he's a physicist, he's a futurist, he's a humanitarian. We've all heard of philanthropists. What do philanthropists do? Yes?
Donate to like the poor or the needy.
Sorry?
Donate to those who need it or like
Well, philanthropists, yes, they help society in whatever they need. Like, for example, a hospital is needed. A philanthropist says, you name the hospital after me, I'm going to give you $50 million. So 50 million, 100 million. You go around and you see that Juravinsky Hospital in Hamilton, for example, or the former hockey arena is now called First Ontario Place because they paid a lot just to name it. Okay? Well, he didn't have money. When he came to North America, he had, and we don't carry those anymore. I got a dime. He only had 4 pennies in his pocket. But an imagination, and a mind, and a proper education, that's the important thing here. He actually studied the theories, and he challenged his professors. When they told him he couldn't do things, he says, I beg to differ, and he proved the professors wrong. So he improved in all of these things because he studied and he worked on it. And that's one of the important things for you kids, is to get inspired and get this solid education. Now he's credited with 315 patents. Some of the patents are the most important patents that we have in the world. They're all his. He died in New York City in 1943, and I'll tell you something. Thinking of everything that he's invented, you would think he'd be a gazillionaire. Yes?
If he only said North America with 4 pennies in his pocket, how did he afford to go to
Education.
He had his education before he came to North America. He studied in Austria at the Graz Institute. Okay? So he was already educated over there, and now he was working for an Edison phone company in Europe. And Edison's man in Europe said, Mr. Tesla, you have to go meet Edison. And then he came over to do that. Okay? But when he got off the boat, he was actually robbed. He lost all his money, and all he had was 4 pennies. He didn't have a lot of money. Where he came from, he was not a very rich man to start off with. He probably scraped up just enough to pay for his boat trip over. Okay? But now let's listen a little bit about Tesla. Oh, as I said, you think he died, he had $1 billion. He basically lived on the gratitude of the former Yugoslavia's king, who gave him a meager pension. That's all he had. He had no money. All right? Why? He didn't care about money. All he cared about is invent, and give back to the world. So he is a philanthropist without money. He gave us more than any philanthropist in the world has given, because he's given us our current life style that we enjoy. So let's listen to
Nikola Tesla. In a museum in Belgrade, Serbia, there is a gold-plated sphere that rests atop a marble pedestal. What's inside, you may ask? Pure science. Or in other words, the ashes of Nikola Tesla, a Serbian-American scientist who is the most underrated inventor of the 19th and 20th century. At a time when electricity was still a luxury, Tesla researched it independently, contributing to every aspect of science and technology. Take his rotating magnetic field and alternative current motor. Those allow us to send power across entire nations without building substations every 1.5 kilometers, and with much less danger than old direct current methods. Though vocally deplored by the likes of Thomas Edison, electricity arrives in our homes this way, even today. Another great invention, the Tesla coil, creates high voltage electricity at high frequency. With this, you can do cool things like powering light bulbs without wires. Basically, this idea laid the foundations for all modern wireless technologies. Today, Tesla coils are still used to ignite the gas lamps that light up the streets. Among other things, Tesla discovered the resonant frequency of the heart, invented many electric gadgets, remote control, fluorescent, and neon lights, which he then had bent into letters. He recorded radio waves from outer space, and had a hand in the field of robotics. Once he built a machine that, when switched on, created an earthquake, nearly demolishing an entire neighborhood. Well, that one was a bit dangerous. Tesla was a true genius, spoke 8 languages, memorized entire books, built functional devices straight from his imagination without writing anything down. He was 200 centimeters tall, popular with the ladies, but had a lifelong dedication to science. Every day he worked from 9 to 6, stopping for dinner at exactly 8. and then resumed his work, often until the middle of the night. Having been celibate for 86 years, broke and alone, Tesla passed on. Having made so much of our current technology possible, Nikola Tesla and his contributions were largely forgotten. But the legacy of true geniuses, though, never really fades, right? They just take some time off inside a gold-plated sphere.
Okay, so this was a very old transformer that you would find on a hydro pole. This would step down the power from within a city. It was distributed at 3,000 volts. Over great distances, it was even higher than that, like 22,000. And now we're talking in hundreds of thousands of volts to push the power. What do you think? Not much has changed. This picture was taken about a month ago. And yeah, you're correct. I heard a comment. I have one in my backyard concept. They are everywhere. So without those, you wouldn't be able to get power into your house. And that was one of the most important elements, being able to transmit power over great distances by pushing up to huge voltages. That's his patent, of course, for the motor. And now I think, I heard somebody say it, but I'll go somewhere else. Okay, right there. Yes?
Tesla coil.
Exactly. We'll see how a little bit how it works a little later. All right? So he's invented almost anything you can think of. You know that even the spark plug in your cars wouldn't run without Tesla's invention. He created the spark plug. So there, you start looking around, just start thinking of what that professor said. If you took all technology that is dependent on Tesla, you would really be in the horse-drawn buggy age. Steam, generating power maybe. All right, not too much power. Yes.
Eventually, wouldn't someone inevitably invent something to?
And you're correct. You're correct. Okay. Why? Because Tesla wasn't the only one working on some of these things. He's the one that put it all together and assembled. He didn't. People may say Tesla invented alternating current. He did not invent alternating current. He perfected the use of alternating current by developing the devices to use it and to produce it and ship it over power. Yes?
It says Tesla's one of his patents says the Tesla electric car, but wasn't that found in like early 2000s?
Well, you know what? He didn't invent the Tesla car. Tesla car took the name Tesla. Just like we took the name for Nikola Tesla Educational Corporation. They took the name. We'll get to the car a little bit later. You'll see something on that. Okay? So when he died, great injustice. Nobody knows about him. Very few. By a show of hands, how many of you before today heard of Tesla? Wow! Did your teachers teach you about Tesla before we came? Awesome! I want to thank you, teachers. You guys should turn to your teachers and thank them. The reason being is when they introduced you to Tesla opened a whole new perspective on life. Tesla is the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But now go a little further. What does a mushroom look like? It has a stem at the bottom, right?
And a hat.
And a hat. This is technology mushrooming out like crazy. But the root of that technology is Tesla. So if you can understand what Tesla did, you're going to be able to build so much more on top of that. Listen to this one.
All right, I got one. All right. Who invented the radio?
That's hard.
Oh, I finally got you.
No, it's just that I don't know if you want the person they think invented the radio or the person who actually invented the radio.
Well, in here it says.
Marconi, right?
Yeah, ain't it?
No, he's the one that generally think invented the radio. In fact, we got a Nobel Prize for it in 1909. Truth is, a guy named Nikola Tesla patented the basic idea for the radio in 1896. Same idea Marconi used for his patent several years later. Tesla fought Marconi till the day he died in 1943. Same year, the Supreme Court ruled that Marconi's patent was invalid, recognizing Tesla as the inventor of the radio. Carter.
Now, what do you think of that? So there is a lot of examples like that. All right, 17 of Tesla's patents. The Tesla coil was a critical component in wireless communication in those days. So Tesla already was there with it. We have gone away. We're now into new technology. We don't have to depend on the Tesla coil anymore to do things like that. But that was a critical component. I think somebody had a question there. Was there a question back there?
I canceled it.
Okay.
It was a comment about Morgan Freeman, because he's a great guy.
Okay, so modern day, as I told you already, modern day technology depends on Tesla. Even your cell phone. All of these things are linked to man. Now,
some of his inventions were ahead of his time. Heck, a few of them were ahead of our time. But some of them, well, let's just say they stand on the shoulders of giants. And while Mr. Tesla never got to see his legacy, we'd like to think he'd be pretty pleased.
Okay, now a little bit about this mad scientist part. Okay? People, when they don't understand things, they think of you as you're crazy. They can't think that that's all possible. So just think of that. You get a person that is so far ahead of his time, they label him, he's mad, it's impossible. What you can do? Yes, you can. Now, we see that, we heard a question about the Tesla car. He did not invent the Tesla car. The Tesla car was actually not even named by Elon Musk. Elon Musk came to the company after the company was already established. But what's important and why they did this, the motor that powers the car is basically, we call it Tesla's motor. They found that that is the most effective and efficient motor to power their vehicle. So they have batteries that hold the power. They're DC, but they convert it into AC electricity to use Tesla's motor. And there's a lot of other things in it. There's all kinds of mechanics, all right, robotic elements. They're Tesla. They must be using radar because they're telling you that it can operate by itself. Well, it's got to have some kind of a radar system to position itself and stuff like that. There's all kinds of gadgets in that car that are actually dependent on Tesla's technology. In 1926, Tesla described the phone. He didn't have the word cell phone. Handheld device, and we'll be able to communicate as if we're standing next to each other. Can you imagine saying something like that in 1926? Can you imagine saying that in 1970? They would have said you're crazy. I never heard of a cell phone till a lot after that, down the road after that. So modern high tech, we talked about this. It's like a muscle. It grows. It's your turn. It's your turn to get inspired. It's your turn to take us the next step. Okay? Right now, academics around the world continue to study Tesla's documents and try to unravel some of the stuff that he worked on because they don't understand it. We still don't understand all of this technology. He talked about wireless power transmission. It's starting to happen, and you'll see a little bit later about that. But there's all kinds of studies going all over the world, and they are also trying to find some of his missing documents. And there was just a recent documentary, a 6-part series. It's coming, season 1's done, but it's coming back more. They're looking for 20 to 60 trunks of documents that were confiscated when he passed away. And they released some of these documents, but there's clear linkage that the very top echelon of the United States knew about all these documents, what happened to them. And I'll give you an interesting connection right now. How many of you heard of Donald Trump. Oh, yes. Do you think Donald Trump is in any way connected to Tesla?
Yes.
How? Anybody can tell me this one? This will.
People say he's crazy.
No. Okay. When Tesla passed away, there was an organization called Alien Property Management or something like that, predecessor to the CIA and all of that. They swooped in and they took all the documents. When they did that, they wanted to, because this was 1943, there was still World War II in progress, and they were concerned that Tesla was working on something called the death ray. All right, and other elements of that time, so they were concerned that the enemies of U.S. might be able to get their hands on some of these patents or some of these things that he was working on. So they seized all the documents and they gave it to a very interesting scientist who was well renowned at the time. His name happened to be Trump. John Trump. He is Donald Trump's uncle. And he looked at the documents, and in a couple of days, he released, there is no value to any of these documents. This is nothing of any significance. However, they did not release the documents. They held them for years. They released some documents. We heard about Belgrade Museum. There's thousands of documents in there. They still haven't unraveled all of the documents, but more documents are being released, and Obama actually released some more documents not too long ago. So this is why this is so important now. It's moving us forward.
During the turn of the century, Nikola Tesla had this idea to send wireless power anywhere around the planet. How we want to do that was set up a sustained electromagnetic wave that would reverberate between the ionosphere and the ground and travel around the world, and we would be able to tap energy out of this. Well, that idea didn't really work out, but it gave us some inspiration for ways to set up wireless power in large spaces. So what we're going to do is we have a metallized room, and we're going to use standing electromagnetic waves that reverberate all around this room, providing wireless power to any device inside.
Formally with magnetic fields. From these magnetic fields, we can couple power out to specially designed receivers. So the room that we've constructed is your standard rectangular type of room, except the wall, ceiling, and floor are all made from aluminum panels. Into the middle of the room, we've inserted a long copper pipe. And in the center of that copper pipe, we've actually cut a small gap into which we insert discrete capacitors. And it's those capacitors that set the electromagnetic frequency of the structure and confine the electric fields.
Since magnetic fields don't interact strongly with everyday objects, we're able to place tables and chairs and everyday furniture in our wireless power room without affecting power transfer.
At the resonant frequency, currents travel up and down the pole at 1.3 million times per second. Those currents travel through the ceiling, down through the walls, and back down to the floor, where they again flow up through the pole. It's those currents that generate magnetic fields that circulate around the pole. One of the remarkable things about this room is that with the appropriate receiver design, we can actually power many devices simultaneously.